So it Okay, so it seems like we're ready to start. I have 7 minutes with a 30-second grace period, and my time will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first of all, we're going to define this house, as the motion says, as the United Earth Government. We're going to set the framework for this round to be net benefits, or we think that just like the net benefit here is just generally like the preservation of humanity, right? So we just want to preserve humanity. Whichever side does this better is going to be the better side. Okay, and then we're going to talk about framing of the round. So what government side looks like and what opposition side looks like. We think that's just a kind of a confusing motion, so this is really important. So on government side, the digital life plan is essentially simulation theory. It's like we continue human life and we all basically just continue to exist in the status quo and we evolve within the status quo, basically like the sun hadn't absorbed the earth. And when the sun does absorb the earth, where like all of like the human bodies, I guess, where all of the consciousness leaves on this supercomputer that we're shooting off into the cosmos. And when the earth does absorb all of the like human bodies that don't have any consciousness in them left, they're obviously all in the cosmos, so they're not really going to feel it. They're basically in comas. Okay, and then what side opposition looks like. You're attaching rockets to the earth and you're trying to go to another solar system. The motion also does say that the digital life project has been given a decently higher chance of success. Okay, now moving on to our first contention, which is about the continuation of human life. So on side government, what you're basically going to see is just the status quo, just within a simulated computer reality. So people continue to exist exactly like the sun hadn't absorbed the earth, and humans continue to exist. So what you're ultimately going to see is like, oh yes, humans are just going to keep interacting with each other the same way. They'll probably know that like they're living in a simulation, but we don't think that this will really affect their day-to-day life because they know, oh yes, we're living in the simulation and this is just what's happening. So we're just going to continue with the status quo because there's no actual thing that you can see within this simulated life that actually suggests that it's not the status quo. There's not really a reason to be like, oh yes, we don't like this because this is just like the sun hadn't absorbed the earth. We don't really see any major difference. Comparatively, on-site opposition, this is a major disruption of the status quo. I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about this later. Which leads me to my second contention, which is on living in other solar systems. Okay, so when you're living in an unpredictable place, a lot of things can happen, right? Space is really unpredictable. You have the transportation process. You have it when moving to another habitable solar system. This means that there's probably other life forms because it has the conditions for habitability. So what do we know about these life forms? We know next to nothing. For all we know, they could be aggressive. They could really not want us there. They could attack us. Or, as the precedent of human nature, we can try and colonize them because we might perceive them as a threat and they're so different from us. So ultimately what you're going to see here is that when you are relocating to this other solar system, when you're relocating, there could be aliens. There could be like just conditions that are necessary to make this world habitable. Yes, we know that it's feasible, but you could all have to walk around in bodysuits for all you know. You could all have to like live in bubbles for the rest of your life. You really, really don't know what's going to happen. You know that like, okay, there could be aliens that are going to attack us. We could colonize the aliens. We could have to live in these bubble suits. Half of us could die during transportation because we're allergic to something in the air. You just have no idea. It's like, it's feasible on some level, but you really just don't know what's going to happen. And it's going to be really, really unpredictable. Even if you don't buy that there will be aliens, conditions under this new sun and in the new solar system are just going to be bad. People do not deal well with change. It can inhibit decision, it can cause anxiety, it can cause depression. Even if their plan succeeds, life there will be much, much worse for the majority of people. We see these changes primarily under small changes like moving. Now imagine if these changes are under the scope of the entire world under extreme circumstances we've never seen before. We also don't know like the impact of the rockets that we're attaching to the earth. This could majorly upend the ecology of the earth. This could upend every single thing about the earth. It could evaporate all the water. We have no idea. So what this means is that life and social structures that preserve human life in the status
Wait,
quo could be
POO? Wait, POC, sorry. Um, Wait, so is this under your second contention?
no, this is our first contention, or yeah, sorry, second contention, living in another solar system.
So wait, your arguments under this was like a lot of things can happen. Space is really unpredictable. There might be like other life forms, and then this is like a different argument about like the rockets themselves killing Earth.
The argument on net is basically just that this is unpredictable and lots of things could happen. And then
So
there are a
this
few
is like
things under this.
one of
There
the
could be
possibilities.
aliens. Yeah, there could be aliens. There could be lots of change. The rockets could harm the Earth. There's just lots of factors.
Okay, cool.
Okay. I have 3 minutes, 20 seconds left. My time will be restarting in 3, 2, 1. So even if their plan succeeds, even if everything that happens exactly right, this is still going to be a lot worse for the majority of people because there are lots and lots of changes. Okay, yeah, now that leads to our third contention, which is on likelihood of success. The first subpoint here is on feasibility. So the motion states that the ability for either plan is feasible. However, we see that there is a much higher chance of success on the government side for the digital life plan. It says this in the motion. So we just think that, yes, okay, this is going to be a lot more feasible than attaching basically rockets to the Earth and moving the Earth to someplace else, right? So we just see that, okay, the motion gives us this point that this is going to be more feasible. Second subpoint here is on the harm.
POC, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait, I'm sorry. So wait, the first subpoint is that it's much more feasible than like attaching a rocket to Earth.
We're just saying our side is more feasible than yours. The
Oh yeah,
motion
okay.
says.
Okay.
Sorry, our Wi-Fi
Yeah.
cut out.
It's okay. Restarting in 3, 2, 1. Second subpoint here is harm caused by failure. So if all of human consciousness is uploaded into a supercomputer and then the supercomputer is shot into the cosmos, okay, what could happen? Maybe the supercomputer gets hit by a meteor or something. All of human consciousness would just cease to exist. The supercomputer just ends. It's not like you're all having to be burned alive by the sun. It's not like you're all facing really, really horrible deaths. It's not like, oh yes, half the people will die of some terrible disease. It's not like we see that there's massive harm, there's massive disease, there's massive just like things that can harm you that actually actively make your life worse. It's just that life ends. We see that this is a really, really peaceful end to human existence and that it does not cause a lot of harms. Comparatively, the harm on side opposition is actual human harm. If the plan fails, the plan could fail in lots of different ways. You could get burned up by the sun because you don't move fast enough, or you could experience the trauma of a spaceship crash, watching everyone around you die, or realize they're about to die. Half the people on Earth could die, half the Earth could become uninhabitable, and then everything changes. We see that the harm caused by the failure of the plan is going to be much, much worse on side opposition because you have people getting actively traumatized, which you do not see on side government. For all of these reasons, I could not be prouder to affirm, and I strongly urge a government ballot. Thank you.
All right, great speech. I'm gonna go top of case, op case, then gov case. I'm gonna start my time in 3, 2, 1. We agree with this house. We agree with the framework. We think we should broadly care about all of Earth, not just the survival of humanity. With that, into the op case, the first contention is on why the digital life progress is probably terrible. The first sub-contention is on the burden of immortality. The motion details that we will achieve a future of, quote, digital immortality. Essentially, we will live forever in this digital realm. We think that if you live for an infinite amount of time, every experience likely becomes miserable. Once you experience everything humanly possible and then some, you start running out of things to experience. You have nothing left to try, and you have millions of years of memories. And as a result, everything seems incredibly dull, incredibly pointless, and doesn't really amount to much. So sure, maybe in the short term, people are a bit happy that they escaped the red earth, but as millions, if not billions of years go by, they end up living depressed lives because they have nothing left to experience, but they can't die. And I think the best way to illustrate this is through an example, through ice cream. If you eat good ice cream, you can enjoy it, but if you eat that same ice cream a million times, over time it fundamentally becomes a miserable experience. You're not experiencing anything new, and as a result, you find that experience boring. This is why at some point people do want to die at some point in their lives. Because if you experience the best of everything, you've experienced raising your kids, you've experienced all of your life, you have nothing much more to live for, and after billions of years, you end up living an overwhelmingly hopeless and miserable life, likely with a fragmented mind due to the fact that the human consciousness isn't designed to contain billions of years of memories. I think it's like we need to note the fact that this isn't going to be developed perfectly. Like humanity needs to develop a system that can store and run hundreds of billions of consciousnesses in only 100 years. It's probably the case that corners have to be cut and certain parts might have to be removed in order to meet the deadline, which results in a lower quality consciousness upload. If you only have 100 years to try and fit all of human consciousness into one supercomputer, you likely do have to cut corners, and those cut corners end up in a worse experience for the billions of people inside the simulation. The second subpoint as to why this is going to be pretty horrible is who controls the supercomputer? We are uncertain of who will control these people's consciousnesses. People in power can structurally ingrain themselves as having more power inside the supercomputer. Realize that this like a human association of Earth has leaders, and those leaders likely have influence over the creation of these projects. Maybe they can give themselves the ability to affect other people's code, or like give themselves superpowers inside the supercomputer. Realize that the people in charge of the United Earth government control how the supercomputer is developed, and those people are probably elites and will guarantee that the supercomputer will always benefit them. So the impact is really clear. First, power imbalances get institutionalized forever because the code quite literally benefits the elite. And then second, social mobility probably stops because it's entrenched in code, and people who are elites now have more ability to do things inside the supercomputer because they exercise influence over like the scientists making the computer. The third subpoint is that rejecting an experience machine. The premise of this argument is incredibly simple. We value actually doing things, not just having yeah.
Sorry, is this a new subpoint or a new contention?
New subpoint. So it's like
Okay.
rejecting an experience machine.
Okay.
Okay, I'll resume my time in 3, 2, 1. The premise of this argument is incredibly simple. We value actually doing things, not just having the psychological experience of doing them. For example, a person who wants to win a debate round, a person wants to win the debate round because they want to go for the experience of debating the round and then having the judge tell them they won. Not just a mental state of feeling happy because they've won something in general while their like brain floats in like a tank or a computer. We think that living digitally uniquely robs you of experiencing a meaningful life because meaning is fundamentally constructed by contact with reality, experiencing real struggles and real harms, not just like a perfectly tailored supercomputer world that you don't feel like struggles and everything is simulated so you know it isn't real. The second contention is why the moving mountains project is pretty simply better. The first sub-contention is like what happens to animals. On their side, you let the earth burn to a crisp. Sure, you might save humans, but you end up like the billions of other creatures that live on Earth just burn and die. Billions of living and conscious beings die because we don't want to help the entire Earth. The second subpoint is that you can create a better Earth. This trauma will bring society together. In the face of like very hard issues, society tends to come together. And we're already seeing this in the status quo of this motion. This United Earth coalition has been formed. We think that if we manage to escape this crisis, because of this uniquely traumatic experience, society will be closer together than ever and work towards building maybe a better society abroad. But in a simulation, you never actually experience any real struggle because you're immediately placed into that simulation. Maybe your memories are robbed of the struggle to build that simulation, and as a result, that perfect society never gets built. Into their case, they have three contentions. The first is on continuation of human life. I think non-unique. On both sides, if you succeed, you continue human life. And I think there's a pretty major possibility in our plan succeeding. Like, I think a decent chance better probably means like 5 to 10% better. So there's still a pretty good chance that our plan can also succeed. And I think the Gov is also incorrect in saying things such as your life will be exactly the same. Why? Your life is infinitely long. You are immortal. Someone can control your life, and free, you know for a fact that you're in a simulation, that your life isn't actually real, and that you are now made up of like code and like RAM and like CPUs. So it's very clearly going to be a different reality. You're going to live forever and experience infinite boredom. You're going to know that elites have more power over you, and now it's actually structurally ingrained into the system, into the code of the supercomputer, and you know for a fact that everything around you is a simulation. It isn't real. So even if it like looks real, people thinking that it's not real makes it just seem fake. It makes it seem uncanny. Their second intentions on living in other solar systems. First, I think it's unclear why people are going to be in conflict with each other. You are in space. I mean, why people are going to be in conflict with aliens. You're in space, not in your own planet. You're not infringing upon their life. And also, let's read the motion. We are going to a habitable solar system. So if it's like completely frozen or there's tons of hostile life, it's probably not habitable. Also, there's no warranting ever as to why there's other life in the universe. We have currently never found any proof of aliens, and NASA has surveyed billions of planets. They just assume that there's life. And also, who knows? If aliens exist and they see a massive supercomputer floating in space, they might want to like take that and use it to like, I don't know, solve math problems. Like very clearly, if aliens exist, they can probably harm the supercomputer as well. On their arguments about how the rockets could melt the Earth, The motion says that both plans have been assessed to be possible. Very obviously, a plan that burns Earth to its crisp doesn't count as possible. And I think scientists who are developing the rockets will ensure that they don't burn Earth to a crisp. Also, there are definitely things that could be unpredictable in developing a supercomputer in space. You're in space, there's gamma radiation, which damages computers, and there's asteroids, which can also damage your computer. And your supercomputer can be damaged and create consciousness glitches. So a gamma ray hits the computer and damages it, but doesn't completely destroy it. Now everybody in the simulation lives in a fragmented world because the computer itself has been damaged. If the computer gets damaged but isn't destroyed, what happens to the people inside of it? They likely live a very horrible life where their consciousness ends up being fragmented by broken computers, and reality literally starts crumbling, but it doesn't get destroyed. It's not like a light switch, it's like a slowly deteriorating planet. Their third contention is on like likelihood of success. Yeah, it's only a decently higher chance. Like, so we don't like maybe 5 to 10% higher. It's still very plausible that it can happen in our world. The second response is that, yeah, maybe the technology might be harder to develop, but you think it's easier for people to agree upon the construction of rockets instead of their consciousness being uploaded to a computer that someone might control. There'll be more backlash in their world, which can actually disrupt the creation because people probably don't trust uploading their brains to computers. They probably prefer rockets, meaning that given that, there's more resistance in their world, which slows down this or reduces the success likelihood of their project. And then you're going to be burning on Earth on their side if the computer fails. Like if the computer glitches or something, Earth will still be horrible. So this impact of like, this Earth, like it will be bad if it fails. That's probably non-unique on both sides. If the computer gets damaged, life is probably bad. Vote opposition.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Maytal Sherman. I will be the second speaker on Gov. I'm quickly just going to set up my timer, and while I do so, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my speech. So firstly, I'm going to be going over a little bit of top of case before I start, before moving down into the opposition case and making our primary refutations. With my remaining time, I will be going back into the Gov case, my case, and I will be explaining why all of our points still stand. If nobody has any questions, comments, concerns, my time of 8 minutes with a 30-second grace period starts now. Okay, so firstly now on this idea of framework, right? We frame this round as net benefits and the preservation of human life. They disagree with this. They say it's all of Earth, not survival. However, we don't see why this would be preferable as this house, as the United Earth government, right? I think as someone who is in this really big tragedy where they have the clock ticking, they only have 100 years left, is going to be in their best interest to just be preserving literally themselves, right? As a United Earth government, you're humans, right? So humans in their own self-preservation, they want to save themselves. I think saving people, animals and plants and things like that are going to be secondary to their own self-preservation. I don't think that the framework of everything on Earth is going to be their main concern. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything else really to add in terms of top of case. I just really wanted to get this across that, right, this is not our primary concern. This is a state of emergency. Okay, so now moving on to their case. Their first C1 is about how digital life is really bad. They talk about this burden of immortality that is named out in the motion, that immortality is really, really bad because you experience every single thing, you never have new experiences. So firstly, I think this is misdefined, right? This isn't implicitly defined in the motion. Of course, there is like this eternal digital immortality, but there are two ways that I think we can look at this. We can look at it the way that the opposition look at it, and we can also look at it that there's essentially the opportunity for human life to survive forever. Not each individual human life to survive forever, but for all human life to continue growing, right, in this simulated consciousness. But secondly, even if you don't do by their definition and don't by ours, we characterize it in our framework, which we contested, that the preservation of human life is more important, right? Even if the life that they live on kind of Earth is not as good, the preservation of human life comes first. Of course, we do care about whether people are happy or not, but once again, this is first and foremost our biggest concern. And under the opposition, we're going to see that it is less feasible for them to survive, and their quality of life is also going to be worse. Okay, now they get into this point about how corners are going to have to be cut to meet the deadline. I really think that this could be true either way, right? We're building a rocket ship essentially on Earth. You're going to have to probably create some sort of shield to save us from all this condition, but I still think that this is going to be worse on the opposition side. Why is that? Because the likelihood of essentially the crash or the devastation is going to be so much higher. Even if it is just 5 or 10%, which we don't necessarily buy it is, but also if that does happen, the lives of the people on the spaceship is going to be a lot worse, right? The trauma and the possibility of constantly crashing or exploding, right? Versus maybe some glitches in a software. I think we know which one is more preferable. Okay, so now they talk about this idea of who controls the supercomputer. They talk about how people in power can gain structural control and ingrain themselves and give themselves more power. The code helps the elite. Firstly, one, we don't know this is true. This is an assumption made by the opposition. It's not said implicitly in the motion that there is going to be anyone controlled of the data. Of course, there are going to be people creating the data, and that's how it's designed, but no one's necessarily in control. Also, once again, this is not their primary concern at the moment. Their primary concern is saving human life. They're going to be focusing on creating this code and making sure that it's actually feasible and it actually works. Even if you don't buy that, elitism doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It happens on op too. They have the power to build these engines so that if something happens to them, they get saved first, right? They might have lifeboats or whatever. They also have the power to decide who fuels them. They get to decide where they go. Okay. Now, lastly, on this idea of rejecting an experience, sorry?
POI.
5 time at the end. On this idea of rejecting experience machine, they say that we value doing some things, not the psychological experience of doing things. But we can think of this computer as something like in the Matrix, I believe the movie is, or even something like VR. Even though it's not actually happening in the real world, we experience it as it is. We have these experiences. Op doesn't have these experiences. We see on Op that it is way less feasible for them to survive and actually have experiences of human life in the same way that we do, right? Yeah. Okay, so now moving on to C2, which they kind of characterize about like what's going to happen on Earth under their plan, right? They say, firstly, what happens to animals in our side? Firstly, I want to say once again, under the contestation of the framework, we don't really care about animals. And once again, I feel like we can see how this logic really cleanly applies. Secondly, they make this point about how there's going to be a better Earth. When people face a lot of things, humans come together. If we escape, they form a bond, right? I think this idea that they can magically solve all the issues that have plagued human reality for as long as we can remember is really, really illogical, and they provide no real warrants for it, right? Because yes, people are going to be going through something traumatic together. That is one of billions of people who want to agree. We can't even agree on which solution that we want to take right now. That's why we're having the debate. The idea that they're going to come together is illogical. Secondly, if you buy their logic that humans can come together in this better world, the same applies to the digital world, right? This just kind of this point also just kind of knifes their elitist point as well, because everyone is going to care for everyone. The world is just going to be happy. Okay, now moving into our case with my remaining 3 minutes. So on our C1, we talk about the continuation of human life. They bring up this point as non-unique, that on both sides you succeed, and and even though it's not the same, there's still a good chance to succeed. They throw out this number 5 to 10%, which we don't necessarily like agree with. They're just kind of assuming this. So we actually have no idea what that number is like. Regardless, even if it is 5 to 10%, that is still a substantial amount, right? And secondly, once again, the cost of failure is much higher on the ops side. But either way, if you don't buy this point is just a wash. It's non-unique. Okay, then they also say that you're in a simulation, so your life is going to be different. It's not the status quo. Elites are going to have more power, right? Elitism is non-unique. You can see the exact same structures taking place on their side, as well as the likelihood that implementing elitism isn't going to be in anyone's favor when they are actively fighting for their lives. In a simulated reality, we can also assume that it's going to be closer to society because they're just simulating what society is. Even if they have a couple of hiccups, it's different than literally upending the entire planet and moving it to another universe. I think that's pretty simple here. Okay, now onto our C2 about living in another solar system. So our first point is kind of about aliens. They say that there's no real warrants for aliens, but we tell you this. If we're moving to another habitable solar system, that means that there is the possibility for human life. Or not human life, but like other forms of life, right? So we know that aliens can exist and they can endure these conditions. And I feel like that's pretty simple, right? And we've seen in the precedents of humans that if you come across people that are unknown to you or different from you, there's going to likely be conflict. So even if we can't predict how the aliens are going to react, we can kind of predict how humans will. They say that we've never found proof of aliens, but we've also never found proof of another habitable solar system. I think this point just is irrelevant. Yeah. So they talk about this point that your supercomputer can be damaged, so lives can be fragments. Once again, I think this is not unique. This kind of goes to a wash. But even if supercomputer dies or damages, we think that every consciousness will be cut out, or there will just be some glitches, which is preferable from literally the trauma of seeing your friends and family die. Okay, so now C3 on the likely. Oh, also they kind of drop our point about how drastic changes can kind of change the human psyche and how that would be bad for human society. Okay, so now moving on to C3 about the likelihood of success and feasibility. If I have time, I have only like 30 seconds, so probably not. So we talk about feasibility, that there's a higher likelihood that we plan, that our plan is going to win. And maybe tech will develop, but there's like no control. We don't trust computers. I think this point is just not unique. The computer glitching is just preferable to watching the trauma of someone die. I cannot hammer this point across enough. For all these reasons, I could not be prouder to affirm and save human life on the government. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Let me just set up my timer. Okay, with that, the order of this speech is just gonna be like one overview and then going down the flow. I'm gonna start in three, two, one. A lot of what you hear from Gov are arguments about how we won't be able to develop this technology. But what they miss crucially from Lucas's speech is a turn to their third contention, which just goes unresponded to, which is that yes, rockets might be harder to develop, but we think it's fundamentally easier for people to agree on the construction of rockets instead of their consciousness being uploaded to a computer someone controls. And I think that this is important given that we're talking about an international institution. We're talking about the United Earth government. And what do we know international institutions of doing right now in the status quo? They don't pass anything. Institutions like the UN have been unable to end things like genocide. They have been criticized as ineffective. So we think on our side, we can actually make the decision. It's comparatively easier for people to agree, yeah, we should construct some rockets and then go to a different solar system. Whereas on their side, people need to agree on their consciousness being uploaded to a computer someone controls, that someone codes. So even if the development might be harder, they haven't beaten the fact that what fundamentally matters is this legislation going to be passed? And insofar as they completely concede Lucas's argument, it's far likelier that our solution actually gets implemented. So this beats the feasibility layer of the debate. It's entirely conceded from Lucas's speech and now true for the round. With that, let's go down the flow. Let's start out top of case. They ask us the question, why should we prefer animals as the United Earth government? Two issues with this argument. First, they are the United Earth government. What does the United Earth government care about? It's fundamentally the Earth and beings within the Earth. They never explain why these people would just be totally okay with the genocide of animals as the Earth burns to a crisp. But second, even if it is animals, why wouldn't humans care about animals? Most humans intuitively care about animals. Half of the world is vegetarian, and this motion presumes that we are in the future when more people are going to tend to be progressive with regards to the treatment of animals. So yes, killing billions of animals, leaving them all behind, does matter to humans, but it also particularly matters to the Earth government. Don't buy the rhetoric that we're just going to ignore the genocide of animals. With that, into our first contention, they first tell you that immortality isn't implicitly defined in the motion. Yeah, it's explicitly defined. The motion itself says that you live under digital immortality. That's word for word what the motion says. So on their side, you live under immortality, which, as Lucas explains, is a fundamentally miserable experience. If you eat ice cream once, yeah, the ice cream might taste good, but if you do it millions of times, the experience fundamentally is miserable, and there's no response to that specific warranting. Then they say that preservation of human life is more important under the framework. And Lucas beats the framework. What's the point of human life if it's an infinite and miserable experience? Don't let them win on this blip about the wording of the framework when Lucas responds to the framework and then explains that an infinite experience is fundamentally miserable. What does it matter if you are living if the living itself is miserable, infinite, and there's nothing you can do about it? Then they say that cutting corners is non-unique. Two issues with this. First, no, it's not. On our side, you can't cut corners because the rocket has to work. If the rocket doesn't work, that's the end. You don't have any Earth. Whereas on their side, even if you cut corners, in regards to, what degree of consciousness you upload, you can still upload people's consciousness. You can still cut corners on their side. Whereas if you cut corners on our side, the whole project fails. So that makes it incredibly clear that on our side, people aren't going to cut corners because if you cut corners, the rocket doesn't work. Whereas on their side, people are more willing to cut corners because even if you only upload some degree of a human's consciousness, it still gets uploaded. Humanity still survives. So the cutting of corners is far more prevalent on their side. Then they say that elites controlling is an assumption made by the opposition. But who do you think is on the United Earth government? It's leaders of the world. It's leaders of world's government. It's not regular everyday people. It's the elites of society. And obviously, if the elites of the society, people like the leaders in China and Russia, are controlling realities for the constituents of Earth, obviously the power structures that elites support are even more ingrained in our society. On our side, reality still is equal. Everyone equally controls it, whereas on their side, the world's government codes your life. Then they say elitism can happen on op. Two responses. First, one singular Earth is being transported. Like, in this claim, they presume that you can transport half of the Earth. That's not possible. You can't transport half of the Earth. But second, even if this is true, on their side, elites literally control your reality. If you try to revolt, they can just change the code. On our side, we still have some degree of power, whereas on their side, they have full control over your reality. Then they say it's like VR. And that's exactly our point. Judges, do you want to live the rest of your life in VR? No, obviously not. What makes your life fundamentally valuable is your experience with the real. And once you take that away and you know that you're living in a simulation, everything comes down. Everything is existential. Then on our second contention, they say animals don't matter. They just don't explain why people just don't care about animals and would be fine with billions of animals dying. So yes, animals do matter. Then they say you can't magically solve issues. And yeah, our argument isn't that you can magically solve issues, but our argument is that people are going to be incentivized to make a better world. The warranting is dropped that the trauma of almost having the Earth burn is going to bring society together. It's that people are going to be more willing to help each other after almost experiencing the death of the other. So yeah, we're not saying you magically solve every issue, but people are far more incentivized to solve issues, to donate to charity, and solve issues within the world. Then they say that the same thing applies to the digital world in response to our argument about how you can make a better world. No, it doesn't, because the elites control society, they control reality. You can't do the same thing. Then they say our point knifes the elitist point. No, it doesn't. Our argument was about general society and how general society will try to work together, whereas elites are always going to be the same and are always going to want to maintain the status quo and the power structures that exist within the status quo. Okay, on to their case. They say, in response to their first contention, I think, first of all, it's non-unique. On both sides, you continue human life. But second, I think that the Gov is incorrect in saying that things will be exactly the same because your life is infinite, someone controls it, and your life isn't actually real. Huh. Then on their second contention, they say that aliens exist. Two issues with this. First, even if aliens exist, it's unclear why people are going to be in conflict with aliens. You are in space, not inside the aliens' planets. There's like billions of miles in between both of you. So you're not
POI.
infringing on their life. They also miss Lucas's
POI.
analysis. I'm in protected time. That we're going to be in a habitable solar system per the motion. So once we get there, it will be habitable. It's not like, we're going to be fighting with aliens. If you want to argue against the motion, then you can do so. But also, there's no warranting ever as to why there's other lives in the universe. Lucas gives you the warranting that NASA has surveyed billions of planets and we haven't found any proof of aliens. And also, we have found proof of habitable solar systems. We found, life on Mars. So for all those reasons, very proud to oppose.
I'm just going to walk you through how you're going to be voting during this speech. Let me just get my timer ready. 4 minutes of a 30-second grace. I'll walk you through top of case stuff and through where you can't vote for the gov, then where the easy ballots are on the up. 3, 2, 1. One thing to be clarified at the top, will humans still die in a quote, digitally immortal world? I think the motion says that humans will be digitally immortal. That means that they are probably immortal. I don't think we should be arguing against the motion. I think lives will probably be infinitely long. You'll be immortal. With that, where are you not voting for the gov? They have two major ballots. The first is that the quality of life in their world will be better. Three major responses which need to be considered. The first is that if the supercomputer gets damaged, that leads to a horrible reality. If your computer gets hit by gamma radiation or knocked around by an asteroid, the computer probably doesn't instantly get destroyed. It starts working incorrectly. People's consciousness get damaged and the reality starts crumbling. So within that, as time goes on, these immortal humans will live in an increasingly worse and worse world as the supercomputer takes on more and more damage to the point where the world itself is an actively bad place to live in because of how glitchy and how buggy and how corrupted it is. The second, wait, I'm gonna pause time because my computer's about to die. Sorry. All right. The second, I'm gonna resume my time in 3, 2, 1. The second response that I give you that goes dropped is that can human consciousness even contain billions of years of memories? This goes unresponded to. If you're alive for billions of years, is human consciousness even designed to adapt to that? Probably not, meaning as time goes on, people's consciousnesses literally start collapsing. The third response we give is that elitism will be perpetuated. The only response that we get is that it's non-unique, but it literally isn't. If you're moving the entire earth, you can't only help rich people, but if elites are the ones who are overwatching the creation of this supercomputer, and they have a massive incentive to make sure they get favorited to ensure power structures exist in the supercomputer, then they're going to make sure that they have more abilities. Maybe they have powers. Maybe they have more influence in the world due to some sort of coding, I don't know, coding aid. So as a result, due to elitism being perpetuated, the quality of life will actually be lower. The second ballot, which they might go for, is on the probability of success. Two responses here. First, the difference in success is only like a decent amount per the motion. But then second, and this goes dropped, and this is a turn, even if the gov case from a technological point of view is more likely to succeed, it fails to take into account how people will react. We tell you that people actively resist the gov solution because they don't want to give their consciousness up to elites and live in a virtual reality that's similar to VR. So even if from a technological point of view it has a higher chance of succeeding, the fact that there exists resistance makes their solution actively far less likely to work than ours. And finally, corners will be cut, so even if it does succeed, it'll be worse. So simple weighing, even if we accept a decently lower chance of success, in our world, humans still live regular happy lives versus immortal unhappy lives, whereas every day goes on, the system becomes buggier and buggier, and their consciousness get one day closer to collapsing, because guess what? Human consciousness aren't adapted to having billions of years of memories. With that, where can you independently vote for us? I think the cleanest place to vote is at the trauma of near death or like near destruction of the world brings people together to create a better world. On their side, elites control the code, the fundamental code behind society. Power structures are literally ingrained into the programming, and you're just living in a moral life which is pretty miserable. Rejecting this machine experience is what we have on our side. We reject it. We build a new world. And because people have experienced this collective trauma, they want to collectively come together to make a new society that is likely better. This goes pretty unresponded to. So in our world, what we can probably ensure is the fact that in our world, people come together post this experience to create a better society. In their world, elites who control the creation of this AI or control the supercomputer are going to ingrain power structures, and as a result, their society will uniquely always be worse because power imbalances are always institutionalized. And even if we die on our side in our world, it is actively better than living an immortal life where after like, I don't know, a million years, the billions of years after that start feeling pointless and miserable. We think that just dying now versus living an immortal and pointless life is better, and dying now versus living in the world which will become buggier and buggier, and where elites control literally every aspect of your life because they have created the AI or the supercomputer. It's actively worse to die. Actively better to die. But we probably don't die in our world anyway. So for all those reasons, I couldn't be prouder to oppose.
Okay, I have 5 minutes with a 30-second grace period, and my time will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this based on the levels of the round. We think that there are 3 here. The first level of the round is that human life is better on-side government. Why is human life better on-side government? And this is because humans get to continue to exist in the status quo. So moving to another planet is completely unpredictable. There's the possibility that aliens will colonize you, or that you'll go to war with aliens, or that you can live in a bubble, that you have bad living conditions, that rockets disrupt ecosystems. Lots of really horrible things could happen on side opposition. These are only a few examples. So they try to respond to this. They give you, so we think that there are 2 main clashes on the level of this round. The first clash is on immortality. First, the definition is not cleanly defined by the motion. The opposition is just asking us to buy theirs with little warranty. Digital immortality, under our definition, is that all of human life can continue to survive forever. So, like, humanity will continue to exist as, like, a concept. Like, human civilization will not end. However, even if you don't buy this, we cleanly win this because under the framework, we explicitly care more about the preservation of human life first, and then how that human experience will be. Lastly, if you don't buy any of this on either side, you're going to see that the quality of life is going to be far worse on side op, and they fail to respond to any of our points about how these drastic changes are going to affect human civilization. So what we're ultimately going to see here is that, 1, we don't really think that humans are going to be immortal. 2, even if humans are immortal, you get lots of human experience, whereas on their side, you could be living in a bubble. You could be going to war with aliens. You could have half the water on Earth evaporated. There are lots of things that could limit human experience. So we see that you're going to have infinite experience, which is going to be better than having like little to no experience. We tell you this in first speech and in MG. Okay. Now moving on to the second clash on this level of round, which is on elitism. So firstly, we don't think that elites are going to ingrain themselves in these power structures because these power structures are going to stay the same in the status quo because we are simply uploading our consciousnesses, right? Everyone's consciousness goes from your brain to a supercomputer. That is what happens. We don't have any reason to infer anything else based on the motion. Secondly, we see that elites' primary concern is not going to be implementing these codes because they are not the ones who are coding it. And 2, this will not be their primary concern because they're just worried about not dying. Opposition tells you, yeah.
This point was made in the first speech about elitism, and you just gave 3 responses which weren't in the MG as far as I'm concerned. I believe it's new, but if the judges do have it, then like judges' discretion.
Let me go to the flow.
Yeah, but I think the only response was like, it's not in the motion, so it's not going to happen. But that's just it's judge's discretion.
No, we had a few responses here, actually. We had a response that, like, the elites could do anything so that, like, okay, so wait, sorry. Let me actually go to the flow because my partner has 3 responses written down. She says, like, she says that, okay, if you don't buy that elitism happens on op 2, this point about, like, elitism not being, like, being non-unique. She says they have power to build these engines, so they have the power to decide who fuels them and where they get the fuel. She also gives the
no, I hear that. I just don't hear like elites won't be the one coding it.
But judge's discretion.
The other stuff you said.
Okay.
We'll take it under advisement.
Okay, great. I'm just going to move on, still under this clash though, Time will restart in 3, 2, 1. You're simply uploading your consciousness. Also see that elite's primary concern is that they don't want to die, so we don't think that they're really going to be that concerned with making sure that they gain lots of power. Also, what we're ultimately going to see is that elitism is non-unique as well, because there can be lots of other concerns where, oh yes, elites could maybe specifically put the placement of the rockets in like lower class neighborhoods, or they could just make it so that they have like escape methods that poor people don't have. So if you really buy that elitism exists, it's non-unique. Okay, and then they also try and tell you that like that they will have to develop this technology a lot and cut corners. If you buy this, then they have to cut corners in how they're going to put the rockets, and like maybe how the rockets are going to work, how long they're going to work, where they're going to work, where these other like escape systems that my partner talks about will work. How would they have time to put elitism in this place if the time frame is so short? Because of this, you're going to vote Gov here. Okay, the second level of the round is that even if you don't buy that human life is better on side government, human life is more possible. The motion states this, and my partner gives further analysis on this in MG. The motion states that there is decent chance that our plan is more successful than theirs. Our plan has a higher chance of success than theirs. The only real response here that you get is, no, it doesn't. And the reason why this response is so unconvincing is because in the motion, it says that we have a decently higher chance of success. We just see this, that it says in the motion, and this is a really, really clean ballot because it says it in the motion, we have a higher chance of success, right? Which means that there is less of a chance that things are going to go wrong. We have a higher chance of, okay, yes, humanity is going to continue to exist. We think that this goes in the motion, so this is a pretty clean government ballot. You vote Gov here. Okay, and on the last level of the round, and there are lots of easy government ballots here, is on what happens if neither of these plans work at all. We don't know the specifics of the likelihood of success for either of these plans. All we know is that they are possible and that ours is higher. That's all we really know about the likelihood of success. So it's entirely possible that this could just all get messed up, and very, very easily. So what happens if it all gets messed up? Firstly, on our side, what you're going to see is that all of human consciousness is going to be uploaded into this computer. So the computer gets destroyed. Human consciousness just ceases to exist. There's no pain. There's no suffering. There are no diseases. We see that, okay, maybe the computer gets damaged. There are glitches, but there is not trauma. So we see that glitches are going to be able to the trauma. It's just like, oh yeah, you cut out for a second, which isn't the same thing as diseases, death, and burning, right? Comparatively, on-side opposition, if this doesn't work out at all, your options are the sun absorbs the earth and you all die horrible, terrible deaths where you get burned alive, or you end up in like a war with aliens or something like that, or the rockets don't work and they take all of the Earth's water. There are just tons of different ways that this could go wrong, and every single one of them involve deep and intense trauma for all of humanity. There's no room for glitches on opposition, but inside government there is. For all of these reasons, I could not be prouder to affirm, and I strongly urge a government ballot. Thank you.
Great debate, guys.
Great debate.
Good round. That was really fun.
So I will just go ahead and say that opposition won 2-1 decision. For me, I voted for government for a few reasons. So first of all, I want to focus mostly on the motion for this one since it is kind of a confusing topic. But something that the motion specifies is that we're looking at the priority of humanity continuing to exist, as it says that the United Earth government pools their resources to save humanity specifically. So I think that opposition's argument about the animals is kind of not relevant to this debate. I also think that government overall does a better job sort of focusing on the preservation of humanity as a whole, even if the quality of life is a little bit worse, and also long-term success in that way. I think that with the United Earth government pooling their resources, that also kind of deconstructs opposition's argument about it being harder to advocate for an upload of consciousness, because the motion specifically mentions already that the United Earth government is international and has already proposed this idea as a solution. And also on the topic of the risk of failure, they did a good job with talking about the consequences of disaster on both sides. I think government wins on this because they emphasize how failure on the digital side is more immediate and without pain compared to the opposition side. And then finally, there's also the issue of likelihood of success. They did a good job weighing the motion there, which already specifies that there's a higher likelihood of success on that side. So that's why I gave my vote for government.
Okay, so I guess I'll go next. So I gave my vote for op. And I have to note that I agree with everything that the previous judge said, except that disregarding the animal argument, which I also agree is correct, doesn't, and the other issues doesn't deal with one primary thing that did not get sufficiently rebutted until, again, there was that very last bit, and then there was the question of whether or not it was okay, which is the issue of elites control. And that did not feel like that got sufficiently rebutted, and so my direction went to up. I also do need to note that there were a few things that I do want to remark on that went directly for my decision, but I do want to comment on. So opposition, when you were discussing cutting corners, and you're like, well, it's actually worse for our project, so therefore people aren't going to cut corners. There's an interesting jujitsu you did there. It's like, oh, it's worse for us, therefore this isn't going to happen. I was amused by that. I'm not sure that's in general a very compelling style of argument to make. But it was an interesting attempted approach. There were two things actually three things I have noted here that I was expecting to set you guys to use as arguments that did not get made. And so since they didn't get made, they don't come into play, but I do want to mention them. So one was government. And when you were dealing with people are going to be stuck for millions of years in these immortal situation, you could have come back and said, hey, digital data can be deleted, and digital immortality is in quotation marks. Someone wants to end their existence in the simulation, they can presumably do so. And that would have been a really strong point, but you didn't. The other two points I was expecting, but again, didn't quite see, again, so they didn't come in, but was discussing the aliens and whether or not they existed. If you're arguing that aliens probably don't exist, and this is already happening in the far future, then you don't need to go based on what we know in 2025 about aliens, right? You could extend that another 100, 200 years, whenever this is happening, right? Presumably sometime in the far future. The third thing, and this was the one I was most expecting from Op, and I was actually expecting this in the initial speech, and it didn't happen, which was to argue, oh, these aren't real consciousnesses if you an upload. Like maybe philosophically, like that's not really a consciousness, that's just a digital simulation of a person. And that is interesting because that was actually when you guys were doing your prep work, struck me as what would probably be the strongest argument Op could make. And so I was really close to going for government on my vote, almost just in reaction to not seeing that. Now, I didn't do that because, again, it never came up and I can't react that way. But it was just striking to me that I don't know if there's a generational difference, if younger people are more willing to accept uploads as people. But like, I was very surprised that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, the elite argument was very strongly made and not sufficiently responded to. And so that caused me to vote for opposition.
I'll just make a few comments given the good feedback you've already gotten. First, I'll start saying I disregarded my personal preferences. Reading the motion, I focused entirely on the arguments as they were presented, and they were strong, very well presented on both sides. It was very close, as reflected in the split panel vote. Ultimately, I felt that the opposition raised a very persuasive point that rockets may be less likely to succeed in terms of the technology, but have a higher likelihood of gaining consensus around the plan, and that resonated with me. And I thought the opposition also did an effective job of showing there's risks on both sides of these plans in terms of what the experience will feel like, and that while the rocket plan may be higher risk, it also has higher reward in terms of overall human happiness. And but again, I thought it was very close, very well done on both sides.
All right, great round, guys. Thank you so much for judging and debating.
Thank you, judges. Great.